Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Become an Ironman in 2026 webinar, where this evening I'm going to be taking you through for around about an hour. Um, going to be talking through lots of different tips and tricks and insights that I can give you to help you prepare for an Ironman in 2026 or 2027, whenever it is that you want to take it on. So I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go. And a little bit about me before we get started is that here we go. I've been a full-time triathlon coach since 2016. So I used to work in the film industry, which I did for sort of 10 years. But my love for the film industry started to dwindle. I went there to make the films that I loved watching growing up, and I realized that actually I was just working on a lot of washing powder commercials and music videos for terrible bands. And I thought, you know what, my passion and my interest in triathlon is increasing, and my interest in the film industry is decreasing. So you know what I need to do is, I need sort of to rethink what it is that I want to do with my life. And so I decided to leave the film industry and to become an Ironman coach, well, triathlon coach. Um, and yeah, I've been doing that for 10 years now, full time for eight of those. I'm an Ironman finisher myself. I've done sort of Ironman Bolton, it was 2019, which is a bit of a monster event. Um, and British Triathlon high performing coach, Ironman certified coach, and I've got different qualifications in strength and conditioning, so level four strength and conditioning coach, and a certified nutrition coach. Because I thought, you know what, I want to learn as much as I can about all the facets of um, of triathlon, so that I can assist people as best I can, rather than simply being very sort of narrow-minded. Nope, it's that annotate button has appeared again. There we go. So in case anyone's got lost, going to go over what makes up an Ironman. So it starts off with a 3.8 kilometer swim in open water. Now, in the vast majority of cases, this swim is going to be done with a wetsuit. So that is, as you can see in this picture here, the vast majority of people are wearing full sleeve wetsuits. Now, wetsuits are legal when the water temperature is up to 24.6 degrees Celsius. If it goes above that, it means wetsuits are banned, which has quite a large impact because wetsuits, they are the ultimate flotation device. If you're wearing a wetsuit and try to swim under the water, you simply won't be able to do it. You'll come straight back up again. So you can just sort of get there and you can just spin your arms as you when you're in the water, and sort of drag your way around the course. It's not fast, it's not efficient, but you don't need to worry about sinking. Okay, you are very safe when you're in a wetsuit. Of course, this is something to consider when you're looking at an Ironman event, is look at the average water temperature. And if it sits around 23, then you are at the risk, if it's a really hot period running up to that event, that at the start of the race they could go, sorry everyone, wetsuits are banned. And if you're not a strong swimmer, if you haven't practiced swimming without a wetsuit in open water, you're going to run the risk of finding yourself having a little bit of a panic attack, really struggling in that swim. In fact, I was marshal at an event this year in the summer, and the wetsuits were banned, and a lot of people just didn't even bother starting or coming along to the race because they knew they wouldn't be able to do it. So it's something that's definitely worth considering, but it's very rare in the UK that this occurs. But if you are going overseas, especially in the summer, it's something to be aware of. And this is open water, so there's no lines that you can follow as you're swimming. You have to look up, lift your head out the water to look for buoys, and you'd be surrounded by thousands of flailing limbs on Ironman race day. So it is the sort of the part of the race that causes the most anxiety in most people. Then we have the 180-kilometer ride, so that's 112 miles. This is going to be over generally relatively challenging terrain because it's difficult to fit in. Generally speaking, you'd be looking at two 90-kilometer loops, maybe a little bit less. It's very difficult to fit in a 90-kilometer loop without any hills in it, especially with the restrictions that race organisers have when it comes to which roads it is that they can close or safely run an event on. So there will be hills, and it will be held in all weathers, unless it is so windy that they deem it to be dangerous. You could be out there when it's raining sideways. And this is something you need to consider in your train. You can't simply train on the calmest, quietest days. You need to get out there. You need to really learn to ride the bike as much as sit on an indoor trainer and just focus on watts and building power. In 180 kilometers, over 100 miles, it is going to take most people at least sort of 6 hours to get around that. And then at the end, there is a 42.2 kilometer run, 26.2 miles, which is a marathon. Now, I remember the days when the Ironman was the ultimate fitness challenge. And yes, this has been replaced by the Ironman now, and the marathon is our glorified cool down. Of course, it's far from that. We'll go into it in a lot more detail later. But this is when you're starting a marathon, with generally speaking, the best part of 8 hours of racing in your legs for most people. Maybe less if you're a very good athlete, then it is going to be incredibly difficult. It's sort of different to a road marathon, where you're not going to be there at that sort of anywhere sort of close to your normal marathon pace. You will be running slower, and you do need to approach it very differently. And in amongst all these, we have our transitions. And when you do a transition, the time does not stop. Okay, it does not go into pause. You have to sort of be as efficient as you can with your transitions. Now, when we're doing an Ironman, you can afford to take your time a bit more to say, right, I'm going to do a full kit change. I'm going to make sure I've got everything right. We can't afford to rush through an Ironman transition. Forget something really important. And sort of go out sort of without enough nutrition, for instance, on the run, not having what we need because we wanted to save a few seconds in transition. It doesn't make sense. Um, these are all components of the triathlon on the surface. Once we look into sort of what actually is involved sort of below that, if we go deeper and we start to really look at what the nuts and bolts are, it's hundreds of hours of training. If you want to get ready for an Ironman, whether it's over 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or like me, 7 years between starting training and my first Ironman, you are going to have you're going to have hundreds, maybe thousands of hours which you're going to do preparing for this. This isn't the kind of event you can rock up to half-baked. Okay? You have to really make sure that that you've done all the training that you need to be able to complete this challenge. A lot of people go in, and Ironman themselves sell it as being, oh, it's 90% mental. I mean, yeah, there is definitely a mental aspect of it, but it does encourage people to sign up and enter and start without enough physical fitness to be able to really help them excel. Um, it's a big nutritional challenge. If you think about if you were sat having a lazy Sunday between breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, how much would you eat? Well, not only do we need to fuel what our body needs to sort of to survive and keep our appetite at bay, we also need to fuel this enormous challenge that we're taking on. And so this involves taking on a lot of calories, but in a way that isn't going to cause us gastrointestinal upset. So that is another major challenge for us. There's also the logistics that are involved, whether it comes to on the day itself, how you're going to get your bike to the race, how you're going to make sure that you're in the right places at the right time, all of your training, planning things out, making sure the bike works as it can. There is this real challenge that comes with the logistical side of things. It's quite easy to underestimate just how much planning is required. We're also managing work, family, and potential injury with our training because success isn't a straight line. People think, right, we start off at point A, we get to point B. Chances are there are always going to be setbacks. There's always going to be illness. There's always going to be other commitments in your life, things that are more important than triathlon. And we need to manage these. We need to adapt to these on the fly as we go. There's also going to be a lot of self-development and hopefully self-reflection during the Ironman journey because you're going to learn an awful lot about yourself during this, not only on race day itself, but also during the training. The training will break you probably at 2 or 3 points in the build-up because of sort of how demanding it can be. To make sure, especially if you want to go for a sort of a good time, if you want to go around that 12-hour mark, What is required to do that? It will put you into some really sort of dark places on some of your sessions, but you will come out the other side having persevered from these things, learnt an awful lot about yourself, and develop more resilience for the future, whether that's future training sessions, race day, or situations outside of sport. We also need to understand our bike. So we can't simply have the bike as being something that we're afraid of, that we are worried that it's going to, it's going to break, it's going to let us down. We don't know how to fix a puncture. We don't know what gear ratios are. We really need to understand the bike to make sure that it's efficient as possible, that we're comfortable on it, that we've got the right kit. We can't just grab a bike from Halfords and go ride, 180 kilometers on it in a triathlon. It's not going to end well for us. Moving on to the swimming now, this is something that I imagine a lot of people will, be watching this with an interest in. So I want to share some tips for efficiency in swimming. And so this is the ability to come out of the water out of 3.8 kilometers swimming and not feel absolutely exhausted. We're not training people to be absolute top end swimmers. We are focusing, getting people to be able to finish a swim and feel good for the 180k bike ride. So, first thing to focus on, if you are very new to swimming freestyle, front crawl, is to exhale with your face in the water. Biggest mistake new swimmers make is they hold their breath when their face is under the water, which makes sense. We can't breathe underwater, so we hold our breath. But the issue with this is that we get a lovely buildup of CO2 in our lungs as this happens, and our body runs out of oxygen. And this means that when we then lift our head out of the water to breathe, not only does it feel like it might be our last breath as we go take the breath, we also have to breathe out the CO2 and breathe in the oxygen and then put our face back in the water, which takes time and it's a less controlled motion. If you're exhaling with your face in the water, if you're blowing bubbles out of your mouth and or your nose, I like to use my nose, some people prefer the mouth, some people do a bit of both. It really is up to you. You're breathing out with your face in the water, lift your head, quick breath in, put it back in the water. It's more controlled, it's less stressful. You won't run out of energy in the same way. We want to make sure that when we breathe, that we minimize our head lift to breathe. So what we want to avoid doing is going from looking down at the bottom of the pool to swinging our head all the way up so we can see the ceiling of the pool above us as we take a breath. Something that if you watch people swim, you'll see a lot of people do. Really, we want to bring our mouth just out of the water enough. Take a breath before you put it back in. Now that's a very difficult skill to master. The next pool swim that you do, you will not be able to do that just because I told you. However, what we will be doing is um, we do want to reduce that lift as much as sort of we reasonably can. Now, if you look at this swimmer here, she is swimming along and she is she's lifting her head to breathe, but her body is rotating slightly. It's slightly on her side. She's about 45 degrees. And that's what we're looking for from our swim. As we swim, we want our shoulder to follow where it is that we're going so that we twist a bit as we swim because that sets us up for a nice breath because our shoulders are already in that position. So we only have to move our head slightly to breathe. We also get a longer stroke length out of that. We also are more hydrodynamic, so it allows us to move through the water with less resistance. So keeping that breathing nice and controlled is really essential. And until your breathing is of a sort of a good quality, as it were, then I really would recommend that you focus on the breathing before you start trying to put in all these long swims, sprinting, all this hard work. Get to the point where you can string together 2, 3, 4 lengths without feeling exhausted, and then you can start increasing the distance that you're swimming. When you're swimming, you want to keep your elbow above your wrist and your wrist above your fingertips in the water, okay? As we push the water back, we want to be using our arm like a paddle, like this, okay? If we're just kind of going back in the water like this, we're not actually really moving much water behind us, okay? Our arms are coming back like this, we're not really doing anything. And a lot of new swimmers have a habit of they have an incredibly powerful hand entry into the water. And then when they actually come to pull the water back. They're a bit limp-wristed and they just sort of push it back like that. What we want is a gentle hand entry and then an acceleration under the water with this nice sort of bend in our elbow here. We've got our elbow above our wrist above our fingertips, really pushing that water behind us. By having this shape, that engaged not just our shoulders, but our lats, our chest, and our triceps as well. So we're using more muscle groups, we're moving more water. And we do want that acceleration through the pool phase. We do want to be working hard in that. Now, that's not to say that you really need to be muscle man to swim. You don't, but you think, this is where we should be applying our force rather than our kick or our hand entry. This is where we should be saving this for. And we are minimizing our kick in the water. So we are not kicking like the devil. Okay, we are not kicking up a huge stream of bubbles behind us. When you take children and you teach them to swim, I worked as a swim teacher for a couple of years while getting the business off the ground. Um, you teach them to kick first, because for kids, the idea of using their arms to pull their way through the water is too complex. You just get them, okay, kick your legs and you move through the water and you teach them that basic propulsion. The mistake a lot of adults make when they get into the water is they kick like the absolute devil because that's what they were taught to do when they were growing up. And then because their parents saw them moving their arms and moving their legs and said, oh, they can swim, and they pull them out of swimming lessons. Whereas as adults, we've got a lot more upper body strength than children. And so it should be about sort of 80-90% upper body and only about 10-20% from our legs. Our legs are there to stop so our kick is there to stop our legs from sinking under the water. As long as our heels are breaking the surface of the water, that's all our kick needs to do, especially if we're in a wetsuit. And I'd really do recommend getting yourself a swim stroke analysis, okay? Everybody in the swimming pool thinks they're doing exactly the same thing because they haven't got that self-awareness to be able to realize, hang on a minute, this might not actually really be working for me, you know? So you do want to make sure that you get somebody to film you, to have a look at your stroke, or hire a coach to come and have a look at you sort of on the pool side, or I mean, you can go to a sort of like a group swim squad where you can get somebody to look at your technique because the coach will be working with so many athletes at once. It can be really difficult sort of to get that attention on you at that point because they've got so many people to look at. Moving on to the bike, if we are taking on 180 kilometers, we need to make sure we have the right bike setup. So we're going to have a road bike with clip-on aero bars as really being the gold standard for our triathlon bike. So we want to make sure that we have, if you look at this image here, we have somebody who is, they clearly have a road bike, so you can see the brake hoods there, but they have mounted onto the handlebars with either a torque wrench or got a bike mechanic to do it to make sure they're secured. We have attached some aero bars, and this allows the athlete to get nice and narrow and low on the bike, which makes them more aerodynamic. If you have somebody who's on like a sit-up and beg bike, a shopping bike where the handlebars are higher than the seat, they're going to be slow because they're going to create a lot of wind resistance. The opposite of this is a nice triathlon bike where you're low, where you're narrow, and you're cutting through the wind so much quicker. To get from riding 0 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour is really quite easy. In fact, I reckon, even sort of the old boy who lives near you that cycles to the shops on his squeaky bike, he could probably do 10 miles an hour. But going from 10 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour is a very different sort of image. And going from 20 to 30 is even harder because the faster we go, the thicker the air becomes, the harder it comes to disperse the air. You see Formula One cars with these wings and gadgets to try and reduce aerodynamics. Same thing with triathletes. And because 90% of the drag comes from the rider, getting a clip-on aero bar set up for your road bike will make you a lot faster. I'm talking, for most people, it probably add on like an extra 2 or 3 kilometers per hour, and that's free speed. So it really is worth looking at. You can get a pair of clip-on aero bars for about £30. Okay, it's really not a huge amount. You can get a full triathlon bike, which is built around that position. Now, with a road bike, when you put the aero bars on, you'll have to move your saddle a little bit forwards to make sure that you're more comfortable, which does compromise the comfort when you're there in your normal road riding position. Whereas a triathlon bike, you can set it up for being completely focused on that time trial position, whilst also having access to the gears at the end of the bars, which you don't get when you have a rope and when you just have the clip-on aero bars. So triathlon bikes are a definite upgrade, but you're looking at about minimum 2.5 grand for a triathlon bike. Okay, that's not pocket change. Now, if it's your first season in triathlon, I'd say look, triathlon bikes are great. I've got one over there. I've got a Cervelo P3, which I love to bits. But I don't want somebody to spend all this money on something they're not sure whether they're actually going to sort of love the sport or not. So I would recommend starting off with a road bike. Doesn't have to be a super expensive one. In fact, a slightly cheaper one that you won't be really upset if you crash, or you chip the paint off is probably a good place to start. I mean, my first road bike I bought for £500 back in 2012, and I was overtaking lots of people on really expensive, full triathlon TT setups. So don't feel that you have to go super hard. Um, and get yourself a bike fit is a recommendation that I have. So you can ride in comfort because comfortable is fast. It doesn't matter how efficient and aerodynamic your position is. If you can't hold that position for more than 30 minutes without back pain, how on earth are you going to hold that position over an Ironman, over 180 kilometers? Okay, you need to get yourself in a comfortable position. It's always a compromise between efficiency and aerodynamics. Don't obsess over weight. This is something that people will go into a bike shop and they pick up a bike and they go, "Oh, I love that one." But this one, feel how much lighter it is. If a bike is a kilo lighter, it probably won't even save you much over a minute over most triathlon courses. I did the maths on for this with some software over Ironman Nice. That's one of the hilliest courses on the calendar. And you only saved a minute for, well, for a client of mine who I drew this up with, he saved a minute for each kilo that we knocked off. Now, a minute is a minute over an Ironman. And if you're looking to qualify for the World Championships, yeah, that's useful. What I don't want people to do is I want people to buy bikes they can't afford for the sake of saving a kilo or two, because they're much better places to spend money on sort of your bike and just triathlon in general. So don't obsess over weight and spend money you don't have on a super light bike, because there are lots more important areas than simply sort of having a light bike. It's not going to ride the race for you. Comfort over aero, already covered that. Keep the bike well maintained is a really important one. So use a chain checker tool, which you can get to check the length of the chain, check that it's not wearing. Once you get to the point where the tool indicates that the chain is worn to a sufficient extent, you need to remove that chain and put a new one on. Because as the chain stretches, then that is going to damage your components as you are cycling, as it picks up all sorts of dirt and grit and mud and salt off the road. It is going to damage these components, and the more that the chain stretches and gets damaged, the more your components will get damaged. It's a lot cheaper to replace one chain than to have to replace all of the moving parts down there because they all wore at the same time. Um, I also keep it clean, degrease it, wash the frame down, really look after the bike and it'll look after you. So the Ironman Marathon, uh, this is a lot of people have it in their mind that they go, right, well, for my Ironman, 3.8 kilometer swim, I can do that in about 90 minutes. And then the bike, I'm going to go for, around about 6 hours. In the marathon, sub 4, that's the goal. I think I can do that. And people completely sort of underestimate the challenge of the Ironman marathon. Because the reality is, it's more a war of attrition than it is a race. And it's quite a sobering thought, really. That, it's for most people, especially during their first Ironman, the order of the day is try not to walk and just keep going. It's not going to be, you're not going to be holding anywhere close to your normal marathon pace. You are going to have walk breaks. In fact, I encourage people to take walk breaks at aid stations and on hills. Walk through the aid station so you get all the nutrition that you need. Don't blaze past the aid station thinking, "Oh, I'll be fine," because there's a good chance you'll implode a little bit further down the line. Um, and on the hills, especially if they're steep hills, it's so much more efficient to power walk up the hill than it is to try and run it. And if you walk the hills, yes, you will get passed by people who are running, but they won't be passing you that much faster. Again, if you come back and you say in 2, 3 years' time, I want to beat my personal best, yeah, these are things we can look at. But if you're first Ironman, my main motivation is getting that medal around your neck. And it's just about finding, going, swallowing your ego and going, look, I need to walk this section here to make sure that I get round without cramping, without injury, without really sort of blowing myself up. When we um, are on the run, we do need to be careful with nutrition because, as especially if we didn't do so well on the bike with our nutrition, our stomach can really be like a witch's cauldron that can be bubbling away. And I have had it before where I was doing 70.3 Staffordshire and I was running along and I was walking next to this guy and suddenly he just like projectile vomits on the floor in front of him and he seems about as surprised and disgusted as I was. It just, your stomach can turn on you so quickly. You do need to be mindful. You can't just afford to keep jamming gel after gel down your neck. You do need to stick to replacing the calories that you're burning, but you also need to listen to your body and mix things up a little bit to make sure that you are protecting that because having real gastrointestinal issues on the run is one of, if not the leading causes of people being unable to finish. Most Ironman marathons are 4 laps. First lap is a reconnaissance, learning the course. Second one is you sort of finding your feet a little bit. The third lap always sucks because you run past the start finish every time that you do a lap and it really is painful to run past it for that, for that sort of second time and think, right, okay, I'm only halfway through. The fourth lap is always a little bit of a victory lap. You're high-fiving people, you're feeling good, you know you're gonna make it, most likely at that point. The third lap will really test you. If you're running through an aid station, you in any doubt, stop and use the Portaloo. It's better to use it now than to decide that, when you're about a mile away from the next, or mile or two away from the next aid station, you desperately need the toilet after all. And that doesn't end well. So if you're in doubt, just use that Portaloo. And the whole Ironman marathon is about relentless forward motion. It's about making sure that we are moving forward, that we keep on pushing at all times. Uh, you know, it doesn't matter if you're walking, if you're crawling, if you're running, whatever it takes, okay? We are just keeping ourselves moving forwards. And you know what? Most bad marathons that people do, they come from people being over enthusiastic on the bike rather than being from people, oh, I'm not doing enough running. My running is really poor. I'm a bad runner. Most of the time is that somebody either they weren't fit enough for the bike, and so just riding 180 kilometers exhausted them, or they went too hard on the bike. They tried to show off on the bike and they get found out on the run. I have had, T2 explained to me at certain events before. It's been like a bit of a field hospital where just people lying on the floor crying. Like they physically cannot imagine going out and running that marathon because they went too deep on the bike. So it is a real case of managing these different areas. Injury reduction. So we're looking at how not to ruin your preparation. And this is really easy to do if you pick up an injury, because we can go from having, a great time, seeing our times improve, seeing our distance increasing, and then bang. Whatever the issue is, you're suddenly out of action. Running is the most common cause of injury. I think it accounts for like 90, 85, 90% of triathlon injuries and your preparation is in tatters. So it's important that to start with, we're careful with our volume and intensity. So we are not doing really high volume. We're not doing loads of intensity. We're not increasing things really hard, really fast. We're increasing it gently and slowly over time to reduce the risk of us picking up an injury. Most importantly, we're including strength training. If you look at this photo here, somebody who seems to be struggling with an Achilles issue. Um, if we have strong calves, if we have flexible calves, if we have a mobile ankle joint, okay, our chances of picking up an Achilles injury is vastly reduced relative to someone who just runs and goes, "Oh, I don't bother with stretching, I don't bother with strength training, I'm all about the running, I'm all about getting faster." Yeah, you know what? That's great. But what I really want you to be mindful of is thinking about the long game, okay, and targeting muscles that we can't even target with our running, such as the glute medius, which is a muscle within our sort of our glutes, within our bum, that controls the lateral movement of the knee. We can't train that as we if we're just from running. So if you see somebody running along and their knees are bowing in with each step, that is going to run the risk of causing them an injury. And the only way you can help protect yourself against that is with strength work. So we can't neglect it in our training. It doesn't have to be hours spent grinding away in the gym. It could just be one session, 45 minutes a week, okay? But it's like putting oil in your car. If you don't do it, you're going to get found out. Um, and remind yourself of the risk reward ratio. So if you're in two minds about something, you go, okay, well, if I do this really long run, if I do this really intense session, when I don't really feel that I'm ready for it, what's the absolute best thing that can happen, or what's the worst thing that can happen? A lot of people, especially they're designing their own training, they'll do ego sessions that they think will make them feel really good. They go, oh, you know what? Well, because I'm doing an Ironman, I want to make sure I get a 40-kilometer long run in. Okay, but your second longest run has only been 25 kilometers. Yeah, but I want to get that distance in. The reward there is increased confidence. The risk is giving yourself an injury that completely derails all of your run training between now and the event. So you do need to be mindful and you do need to play the long game with this. And if you're in any doubt, see a physio. Now, I normally work on a three-strike rule. If somebody comes back to me after a session and goes, Simon, my knee hurts, I go, okay, that's not great. Why don't we, like do a little bit of stretching in the areas around it, and see how it goes next time. And honestly, most of the time, the athlete will forget that it was an issue. Sometimes, however, it does flare back up again. And I go, okay, that's not good. Let's really focus on like here's some stretches, here's some exercises. Let's really loosen up this area. Let's relax it. Get a sports massage. And if they go for a third run and it's still there, then I go, right, we need to see the physio because this clearly there is a pattern here. This is becoming an issue. If you go straight to the physio when you first feel a twinge, you don't actually give them a huge amount of information to work on. Whereas if you can tell them, this happens, this pain is here in this part of my hip, and it flares up about 50 minutes into a run, or whenever I go up hills and I feel it when I'm going up the stairs, that is something that really gives them something to work on. If you say, "Oh, my knee hurt once during a run," doesn't that it's very difficult for them to actually help you there. So, nutrition strategies, if we're fueling our training and our racing, the focus should be on carbohydrates. Don't listen to people who tell you to go for low carbohydrate diet or that you're going to have no carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is broken down really quickly. It's really efficient for being used as fuel. Fat and protein take much longer for the body to break down, especially fat, and that you will feel that will sit on your stomach as your body is taking extra time to digest this. It slows down our stomach emptying rate, which means it just makes us feel an awful lot more uncomfortable. Generally speaking, 60 to 120 grams an hour of carbohydrate is the recommendation. Now, this is a huge window, but it does depend on a number of factors, such as sort of your body weight, how used you are to taking on these kinds of nutrition, and also just sort of your general sort of you as an individual genetically. But generally speaking, the athletes who take on more carbohydrate per hour do better than those who have low carbohydrate intakes. Casper Storms, who won the men's Ironman World Championship, took on 183 grams an hour of carbohydrate during his race. That is a ridiculous amount of calories, and I do not recommend that anyone goes out and tries to replicate that. But whereas sort of 10 years ago we were talking about 60 grams an hour, it's clear that the game has moved on. Our understanding of the human body has increased, and we are now able to understand just how much it is that with enough training, we can train our body to be able to digest. Sports nutrition, gels, bars, sports drinks, it's convenient. You get really concentrated sources of energy in there, but it's not essential. Whatever it is that you are looking to take on, I mean, when I did my first Ironman in Bolton, I had Jamaica ginger cake. that I cut up into 30-gram slices and I weighed it out so I had 30 grams in each slice. Munched on that as I went round. And in my special needs bag, I put in a bunch of comfort foods that I thought that I might want when I'm out on the bike to help sort of settle my stomach. Um, so do experiment with real foods rather than worrying purely about, well, I need to find gels that work or bars that work. If those don't work for you, don't stress about it. Find something else that you can carry with you instead. It is important to replace salt that we lose through sweat. Sodium is really important for managing the fluid that's moving between our bloodstream and our organs. Now, if we don't have enough sodium, our organs tend to start swelling up with water because we can't disperse the water out of the organs, which results in degradation in performance. It can also give you headaches, nausea from your brain swelling within your skull. In extreme cases, it can even put you into a coma and kill you. But I mean, you would have to, things would have to go really wrong there. But for the sake of performance, we need to make sure we're taking on some electrolytes, we're taking on some salt, replacing the sodium we're losing through sweat. And we need to train our stomach. We need to make sure that we are listening to our body. We need to make sure that we are, uh, that we aren't forcing down stuff that our body is telling us, look, you're really pushing your luck if you want to have another one of those. We need to listen to our body, but we also need to push the limits in training of what it is that we can eat and experiment and find things that work for us. And for with regards to fluids, about 500 milliliters an hour is a pretty good area for you to aim at. If you have much less than that, you run the risk of dehydration. That's something that I found myself with my own training is that I think in a lot of years previously, especially over the half distance and longer, half and full distance, that I wasn't drinking enough. And as a result, I was running into nutritional issues on the run. And that just sort of taking on a lot more water you think that you need, it is actually really going to help you with your racing. Getting a bit more technical, looking at key training sessions that you need to do. So your long, steady rides and runs are going to be your absolute staples. These are going to be your bread and butter because this is what's going to be closest to the race day for you. If you do loads of interval sessions are great, but nobody cares about your 5K time when you're walking the Ironman marathon. Okay, when I did my first Ironman, I could do a 5K in under 18 minutes. Okay. But I still walked really good chunks of the marathon because I wasn't able to get the training in because of the hours that I was working at the time. I just kind of wanted to get out there and do an Ironman. Um, but I didn't have the aerobic fitness that I needed to be able to get round that, to be able to run the whole marathon after 2,500 meters of elevation gain on the bike. These long, steady sessions are going to be the absolute most important sessions of the week because the duration, the intensity you do these sessions at is going to be the intensity that you're racing at on race day. A lot of people, think, okay, they split the Ironman up into three disciplines instead of going, you know what, this is actually a day that could be 17 hours. If I told somebody to go out for a 17-hour bike ride, they go out really slowly, think about pacing themselves, how chill it has to be. A lot of people, they'll start the Ironman bike and they go out like the clappers. Um, and you do really need to just accept that, this is going to be our race pace. And also this long, steady session is the best way for us to build our aerobic capacity, our ability of us to inhale oxygen, get the oxygen into our lungs, to our heart, and to our muscles, where we can turn it into ATP and we can actually contract our muscles to move. If we don't have aerobic fitness, we will get out of breath. We will just sort of fail to achieve our goals. So these sessions are absolutely critical. Open water swims are another session we really need to include in. We can't just expect that we'll be fine on race day. We need to get in, especially ahead of an Ironman. If you don't have any experience in open water, a good half dozen open water swims in the run up to get used to having your face in the dark water, to be able to get used to wearing your wetsuit. Practicing sighting, practice being around other swimmers because you can't afford to have a panic on race day. Okay, that's an awful lot of time, money, and effort to spend to be pulled out of the water after 10 minutes because you had a little bit of a freak out. VO2 max sessions. So these are at between 105 and 120% of your threshold. Your threshold being the pace or power roughly you can hold for about an hour. So when you're at this intensity, you are going to feel that it's unsustainable and that you're not going to be able to hold it for long, which is fine because you only really be holding it in most cases for a maximum of about 3 minutes. After which you have some rest. But we start off easier. We might do 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then maybe build up to those 3 minute intervals. But after each of those intervals, the rest is equal to the work. So 30 seconds running, 30 seconds rest. 2 minutes riding, 2 minutes rest. And you build it up like that. And you spend time in this VO2 max to improve your body's ability improve its ability to process oxygen at a very high intensity. Um, Hill reps, incredibly underrated as a session, I believe. If you are looking to improve mechanical efficiency, leg strength, hill reps, and even VO2 max, hill reps, fantastic session. And when it comes to tempo, threshold, and sprints, if you're getting ready for your first Ironman, we do keep these relatively low down the priority. Let's not say we'll do none at all, but you don't expect to see as many of those as you might think you would, especially if you're used to doing shorter events. Even a 70.3, there'll be more in the way of tempo and threshold. With an Ironman, especially somebody's first Ironman, it's just a case of getting the miles in the legs, not developing unnecessary fatigue. And how do we break our training down over a week? Well, there's a big difference between our preparation phase, which is where we'll be at the moment, and our build phases, which is where we'll be kind of 8 to 10 weeks out from race day. Because right now, it's low volume. We're spending more time in the gym working on strength, working on technique, we're working on skills. We are just laying the foundations so that when we start our base training proper, we can hit the ground running and we can put in larger volumes without fatigue than we'll be able to otherwise. And the purpose of the base phase is so that when we go into the build phase and we get really close to race day, we can put in some really big training blocks without it absolutely killing us. So right now, we are looking at longer sessions, well, not even longer sessions, easier sessions, shorter sessions, steady state sessions. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel and go really hard. So then we got long, easy sessions should be the priority. If we are going to have to lose a session in a week, it's better to keep in that 2 or 3 hour ride. So keeping that 2 to 3 hour ride and drop another couple of sessions in the week than it is to prioritize the interval sessions at the expense of that long, easy session. And when you're increasing your volume each week, increase your longest ride by roughly about 10 minutes each week and your longest run by about 5 minutes each week. Every 4 weeks, I'll often do a deload week with athletes where we stop trying to push the limits and we take an easy week to allow the body to recover. But most weeks, when you're training hard, you're looking to incrementally increase that over a season. Most Ironman athletes, they train 6 days a week, one session a day. That's not to say you have to train 6 days a week. You can train 5 days a week, be absolutely fine. 4 days a week might even be possible as long as you're getting a long ride and a long ride in most weeks. Um, so that's something to think about. And sort of 2 swims, 2 bike, 2 run, and a strength session is roughly standard. A strength, it might end up being a double day. Or we could drop a run, a bike, or a swim, depending on the athlete and their background. That's how important I believe strength training is. And we should be focusing on our weaknesses. So if you are a fantastic runner, if you come from a running background, then don't just do loads of run training because that's what you enjoy. Okay. Focus instead on your swim if you can't swim for toffee. Okay. So be sensible with your distribution. And what should the longest training sessions be? Well, we need to dial back at some point. We need to go, okay, we've gone long enough with our longest training sessions now. When can we start to taper off? When can we focus a bit more on other areas? So I like most athletes to hit that 3.8K mark, ideally about 6 months out from the race. Because it's not actually, for most people, it shouldn't be unachievable to hit that in the pool a long way out. Now, if you're just starting and you're thinking, oh, my Ironman's in 6 months, I'm nowhere near 3.8K, don't worry a huge amount about that. But If you are starting a long way out, if you're starting sort of 10 months out, 11 months out from the race, then I believe that 3.8K with about sort of 5, 6 months to go, it's a real confidence booster to be able to knock that one out. With regards to the bike, I'd like most of my athletes to do a 100-mile ride on the road ahead of the race. So you can ride 100 miles, you can ride 112. If it's especially hilly where they are, I might say go for about 6 hours instead. Or if they're only able to ride safely on the turbo trainer, about 6 hours. Uh, as for the long run, 25 kilometers is all that triathletes really need, 30 at the absolute most. Because the Ironman marathon is so different. There's nothing we can do in training to replicate how hard the Ironman marathon is. We're not actually being super specific with that long run. What we need to do is we just need to get the miles in our legs spread out over the weeks and the months built up to it, rather than focusing on our biggest run. And I do recommend against going for an Ironman in the run up to doing a marathon in the run up to an Ironman, because the chart that the amount of time that takes out of the rest of your cycling swim training, and the fact it's not actually awfully specific to the Ironman marathon, it just doesn't sort of really add up for me. So one message I want to sort of give you, I guess, is don't let Ironman become a second job. You know, it's very easy to let this become something that takes over, not just a part-time job, it could feel like like a second full-time job in some cases. Um, it can really take a huge amount out of you. And sort of those around you. It appears here we go. So, other sort of unseen time sinks that people don't think about. They think about the training. Oh, 12 hours a week for training. I can find that. When it comes to actually planning your training, researching the latest training methods, trawling YouTube for all these answers to these questions, having to go through these bloated videos trying to find the answers. Um, people who take triathlon seriously, they're going to buy textbooks and bits on the sport so they can read about learning all about, the triathlete's training Bible, those kinds of books. They're really going to want to sort of further their sort of advancement as an athlete by reading these books. I mean, that can be sort of 12, 18 hours to get through those. And analyzing their data, they upload their ride and they go and they're trawling through the data. What does that mean? What can I do with this? All of this, it can add hours each week of doing all of this admin. And here we go. So my suggestion is to let me do the admin, the planning, the research for you. So most of what I do as a coach is more kind of like a project manager than it is, pushing somebody really hard all the time, So my cheapest option I have is a bespoke plan. It's £60 a month. I build a plan around you completely from the ground up. So you don't have to worry about how to fit things around your life. You tell me what your situation is, I build the plan. We give you a full consultation for about 90 minutes, build a plan around your lifestyle, work, family, any other commitments that you have. We target your weaknesses with your training, make sure that you're doing the sessions that you need to be doing rather than just the ones that you want to be doing. We progress it all in a way specific to you as an individual, and you have personalized targets based on fitness tests that we do to make sure that you're hitting the right intensities. The next level is my monthly coaching, where it's £120 a month, which is quite a big step up, but you have plans written on a monthly basis rather than it being a sort of, I mean, the bespoke plan I generally write in either 3 to 6 month blocks. When it's written on a monthly basis, we're able to adapt a lot quicker to like life as it changes, adapt to sessions, all of the sort of situations, missed weeks a lot easier. You have a monthly check-in with me, have a monthly call where you can feedback on what's gone well, fill me in with what your rest of your training, your month looks like, your next month, how the training's gone, things that are going well, things that are not going so well. Ask me questions about your technique, ask me whatever it is that you want. Um, and each month is planned around social events, work trips, holidays, anything like that. We can really be a lot more reactive with this. And if you do have like little niggles, missed sessions, we can then adapt the plan around that to make sure we don't miss anything really important. And then top end is my full coaching for 250 a month, where the plan is written on a rolling weekly basis, do daily data analysis and comments on training peaks, unlimited messages, emails, and calls with me within reason to make sure that we're fully dialed into it all. Free Training Peaks premium account included, and the plan can be adjusted midweek to adapt to things as they shift and change. And with all of these bespoke options, give you educational material worth over £500 you can have for life. Community where we're sharing training tips and discussions around the sport. Discounted rates on additional sessions that you want with me, consultations and the like, and a free swim video analysis. If you want to purchase this in the next 7 days, I'll throw in a free video analysis. I don't like to give a promotional offer. It's with these, it's like, oh, it's like seeing your broadband provider offer something for £10 a month. Oh, it's only for new customers. It leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. But I will give you a free little swim consultation if you sign up in the next 7 days. There's a lot of myths around coaching. It's not just for elite athletes. It's not all about go hard or go home. It's not just a short-term solution. It's not this really authoritative relationship or performance at all costs. And it's not a one-way relationship. It's not just me telling you what to do. It's about me asking the athlete, what is it you want to achieve? When do you want to achieve it? What are your boundaries? What are your constraints? What are your strengths? And I go away and I build something completely around them. So it's not simply for the very best of the best. And if coaching is beyond your means, then I have a series of Ironman training plans. I'm going to stick the link down in the chat. Whoops. Nope, go back. I'll stick the link in the chat shortly. Once I'm at the screen sharing. Um, Start from £45. You can have additional bolt-ons for nutrition and strength. You're not guessing your training, and it's a lot cheaper. Even if it's £45, it's a lot cheaper than getting injured and paying £120 to a physio for a initial session. And these sessions, like all of my coaching is sent straight to your watch, so you can follow these sessions in real time. Now, we're going to do a question and answer, but before we get onto question and answer with me, Sam, you there?
Yes, I am. Hi. Yeah.
There's his beautiful face. So Sam is an athlete of mine who completed Ironman Wales in Tenby a few weeks ago. So I thought, Sam, if you can just share with everybody else, for you, what was the like what did you wish that you knew when you were in this position, just thinking about getting towards, the sort of starting this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember it was probably around this time, give or take a
I
few
think it
weeks, that I
was.
reached out to you, Simon, because so I bought my Ironman 10B entry a month before. So on the day of it opening, I bought my 10B entry, and I tried a month of training, and it was all right. I was based on just Googling and research, and it went okay. I missed a few sessions here and there. I woke up every now and again. I was like, I can't bother doing my sessions this time. The one thing I thought that was, again, that for me, I was like, I'm putting so much money down on the Ironman itself. It's not a cheap entry and all this, and um, I'm quite physically fit, so I know my fitness is fine. What it is, I need to know that I'm doing everything correct, and that was the big thing for me. That a year ago, I was like, do I do it? Do I not? I think the big thing for me was that I went, you know what? I'm just going to pay for a coach, because it's this. It provided me that extra bit of confidence that I know that what I'm doing is now correct as well. Um, I think that was like honestly the biggest thing, that coming into finishing my Ironman, I was like, wow, that was awesome. I don't think I would have been able to do it without as easily as I did without having as much having the coach. I'd had to do a lot more research myself, and it helped having that reassurance, because sometimes I'd go into a conversation with yourself and say, oh, I'm thinking about this, that, or the other, and sometimes I'd be right, and sometimes it would be like, yeah, that's a good idea, and other times it'd be like, maybe don't do that, maybe try something else, maybe try this, and that was one thing that was really helpful, is having that confidence that I'm on the right tracks. And you get that with the coach. So coming into it last year, absolutely the biggest thing for me was that I really am so happy I did was pay for a coach. I've got I did the Ironman on an aluminium frame, so nothing fancy, an aluminium Trek that I put together over COVID, nothing fancy, running Shimano 105s. I managed to pick up some nice wheels for it and things like that, but it's generally wasn't the fanciest bike. I had an entry level swim wetsuit. I bought a tri suit quite cheaply. So here and there, I was really trying to like skip out on costs. But the main thing that I'm again happy, I keep telling myself I'm happy I did, was I paid for the coach and I didn't sort of like cut corners there. Because I think the biggest thing that people say is having a really nice car is brilliant, but if you get a really good engine, that's what's more important. And it's sort of invest in your engine. Don't miss those training sessions. If I'm going, obviously, I'm going again next year for another Ironman. I'm not sure where yet, but I'm hitting the training again. And I think the thing that I'm telling myself this time is I'm going to be a lot less complacent with myself. I think that's the word. Basically saying to myself, no, you're not missing this session. You're not missing this session. Because when you miss one, you miss two, it just adds up and then your week's gone or your month's gone or whatever. And it comes quickly as well. That was the other thing that really surprised me in the last few months. I was like, oh, I've only got, 3 months left. That's fine. I've got time, go on holiday, take it easy. Oh, I've only got, 2 months. Oh, I've got a month left. It builds quick. So definitely, this time around, I'm coming into it again. I'm telling myself, don't be complacent. Don't sit back now, because right now is where you can get your best improvements for coming into the next phases. It all bases itself off this. So really, like, just keep going, whirring away. It is, it's a marathon, not a sprint. The training is a marathon as well. It's a real slow burn, but just consistency was key. And I think that's really important. That's what I'm telling myself this time around again. Yeah.
So of like the tips in the slides that you saw, I know you joined about sort of 20 minutes ago, sort of looking over like the swimming, the cycling, the running. Which of those, are there any of those that at the time you thought to yourself, oh, like I don't need to worry about that. But it turns around on like race day, you're like, wow, like I didn't realize how important that actually was. Not from a coaching side of things, just as an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, just from coming into it, obviously I've got quite a pretty strong background in cycling. That was where a lot of my thing was. So I've had a bit of fueling, from it. But for that event, I did a middle distance a few months before going into the Ironman, and I didn't get my fueling quite right. And it's very true to what they say that fueling is the fourth discipline. I came into the middle distance I did with an okay time. I think I finished in about 6.5 hours or something like that. It was all right. It was a good day, but my ride, I really bonked quite hard. I lost a lot of energy on the ride just because I didn't fuel quite correctly, and then I was having to like catch up on the run.
Mm.
I came into Ironman 10B being a lot more sort of planned in. I really actually planned like my preload and planned my actual fueling for the day, for the swim, for the ride, for the site run. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. I fueled myself fully on myself. I didn't use aid stations and stuff like that. Mainly, I took a bit from the run because it was just easier to get electrolytes that way. But generally, kept to myself. And I think that's the big one. Was people say that it's the fourth discipline of Ironman, of triathlon. It really is. The other one as well, that from the slides, that was really important for me was I came into it not really being able to swim that well, and building up quite quickly on the swim. I had a shoulder injury, which we picked up quite quickly and improved pretty nicely. But again, that was really important. If you're coming into injury, bring it up and try and resolve it, because that on the day I taped my shoulder actually on the day
Yeah.
just to avoid anything, but it was really important just resolving these injuries as they come rather than go, oh, it'll sort itself out, because you don't have the time. You really just got to keep consistency, and dropping a few sessions because of an injury. Obviously, if you can't do it, don't do a session. But find ways to resolve it. And through training, you will, because you know the strength sessions are where you target and avoid that injury. Is kind of the thing.
Yeah, nobody got into triathlon to sit there grinding out in the gym. So, it's we do it to go out running and swimming in lakes and for these great rides. So it can be a bit of a hard sell. But yeah, that is where the magic is. Do you have any one final parting tip for anybody watching on YouTube or live?
Yeah, absolutely. Trust the process completely. I think, and enjoy the moment. Actually, I'm going to go for two. I'm going to ignore you completely and go for two. But trust the process. You know, this time last year, my swimming wasn't brilliant and my running was okay, but I got around in 14 hours and 15 minutes or something like that,
Yeah.
and it was awesome. I had no idea I could do that, but it was just consistency. And you may start off in your first few months, and I actually had the same thing. I start first few months, I was like, "Is this right for me?" I'll keep sticking with it, and I'm really glad I did, because my first few months, I felt like I wasn't really doing much. I was going really slow. I felt like I wasn't exerting myself as
Mm.
much as I should have been, and I then started doing research myself, and it backs it. It's the 70% of your endurance stuff is really easy, gentle stuff. But just trust that, because it works. Absolutely does work. I built my speed up. I built my strength up. It absolutely works. And just to kind of bring that into it, the second part is enjoy it. The waking up in the morning and getting on the bike, not so much fun. But when you're on the bike, it's great. And if you're going to 10B, obviously I went to 10B, it is incredible. It is awesome. The views are brilliant. The community is incredible. I'm sure most Ironmans like that as well. Obviously, I've only done 10B, but just enjoy that day as well. That day is your victory lap for all the training. So if you hit the training perfectly, you can use the day as your enjoyment. That's the final thing I'd say, is just enjoy the day, enjoy the training.
Good man. Thank you, Sam. So, does anybody have any other questions regarding anything Ironman? Feel free to pick my brains, whether it's something that was covered on the slides or something that's completely left field.
Yeah, hiya Simon.
Oh,
It's Duncan here.
hey there.
So I'll admit first of all that I'm not a beginner on the Ironman stuff. I've done four.
Oh, there we go.
Um, so similar to Sam, I've done 10B
Ah,
in a storm, which was fun. Bolton,
2016?
yes, that's the
Yeah.
one. Yeah. And then I did Bolton. I've done Cork and Cascais in Portugal. Um,
Mhm.
but so next year I move up in an age group.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about doing another one,
Mm.
with a view to being at the bottom end of the age group. Obviously, trying to
Yes.
be a bit better than I am at the moment.
Hmm.
Um, and the two areas that I think I can possibly improve on, first of all, is the benefit of a tri bike over a road bike.
Yep.
And what do you think? I mean, obviously, you use the phrase 3 watts and so on. But as someone who isn't particularly confident about using tri bars and so on,
Mhm.
how much time and effort would you need to put into that to become comfortable with it, and also picking the right course to
Mhm.
suit the technical skills that you need to ride a tri bike
Yeah.
over a road bike?
So, how much time have you spent using tri bars previously? Have you done races on them?
I've used clip-ons occasionally,
Yeah.
but I'm very much a sort of sit up on the
Yeah.
hoods and just bash my way around.
And what is it about the tri bars that sort of freaks you out the most, as it were?
Um, the the balance and comfort.
Hmm.
So I guess the comfort is more down to then having a bike fit, but
Yeah.
certainly the sort of the balance and the cornering and that side of things.
So that does come into the bike fit in itself, because the further stretched out you are, the more twitchy the handling is going to be. Um, so the sort of the higher up the bars are and the closer they are to you, the more in control you'll feel. So there is always a learning process. I mean, I remember when I got my first set of clip-ons. I was riding along the hoods, and it's like, okay, build up the courage to put one arm down on the bar, and then when you get to a really flat bit, you put your second hand on, and you're riding only on the absolute flattest, smoothest roads. And you see a pothole or a speed bump, and you suddenly jump back onto the hoods because you lose your bottle. Then about 3 years later, I found myself on my tri bike going around a corner whilst opening an energy bar on the aero bars. And it's like, oh wow, like I guess I overcame that. A lot of it does come down to to time spent. It's riding in controlled conditions. So rather than it being, oh, I'm going to go out on any old road. It's being okay. Well, let's actually focus on riding somewhere that is going to be of a good quality surface, where there's going to be minimal corners, and just sort of slowly increase the time that you spend on those bars. And there's no shame in sitting up and sitting on hoods for a period of time. But if you can slowly improve that, that will help. When it comes to the comfort, again, bike fit is a massive part there, but also mobility, strength in the lower back, the glutes, all of that area there. So there's less pressure on that area as well as your lats. The muscles in your back, these are all going to help stabilize you sort of within that position, help it be more comfortable. Because if you are taking an Ironman, if we're looking at 180 kilometers, you need to be comfortable for at least 4 or 5 hours of those. Yet the last hour and 90 minutes you have to accept, you might be getting to the point you're going, I can't wait to get off this thing. I'm really starting to get a little bit, sort of seizing. I see Sam smiling there. um, it is going to suck a little bit. But it's about that just like slow persevering, getting a bike fit, and also playing around with the positions bars yourself as well. Go, okay, well, let me see if I can sort of bring them closer to me, longer away, play around with that. Maybe try, because you've got the bars that are flat, you've got the bars that have the S bend, and the bars are like the ski bars where they really point up like that. Have a go, sort of try out some of those. I found that the ones that are completely flat, they tend to move you further forward. They're a more aggressive position, but it's also a more comfortable position. Whereas the ones that have those sort of those bends in, I find that's what I have at the moment. That's what I race on. I think they're actually an awful lot sort of nicer, and you can also play around with how much you tilt the bars up or down. And if you tilt them up a little bit, you can go for sort of a bit of a praying mantis position where you're going along like this, which again, you don't get yourself quite as low. But if it's more comfortable for you, that is the important thing, and it is that offset between comfort and speed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's quite good, especially the element of being stretched out, and the control that you have. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So
It's always going to be a compromise.
yes, yeah. So the second part then to that, which sort of links in really, is that of the three disciplines, the swimming is my weakest.
Hmm.
Um, and part of me thinks, well, I should spend a lot more time swimming,
Hmm.
um, but and less perhaps on some of the others. But no matter how much extra swimming, I mean, how much you might make, say, a 5 minute saving,
Mm.
whereas for the bike element or the run element, where you're going to be out there for 6 hours and 4 hours, your the benefit you're going to get from the training is going to be better on the bike and the run. Is it
Hmm.
worth spending that extra time on the swim?
So there's sort of two elements that you can look at here. Is that first of all, you've done several Ironmans. If someone could say to you, "Oh, if you could take 5 minutes off of that race, would you have?" Chances are you've gone, "Oh, yeah, that'd be brilliant. That would have got me below certain benchmark or something like that." 5 minutes is still 5 minutes. Of course, it's over a long day, but it is still 5 minutes. But the other way to look at it is if you can come out of the swim, even if you're not faster, you can come out the swim fresher and you come out there with that bit more confidence so that when you get on the bike, you feel a lot better rather, even if you swam the same time you did previously, if you just come out feeling stronger, then that in itself is quite valuable. But you do reach a point of diminishing returns where you do get to a point and you go, oh, it's really not working for me. So the question for me is, how fast am I improving in the cycling and the swimming? Am I seeing like, real improvements? Am I seeing that my FTP is increasing, sort of month on month, year on year, and I can keep continuing on that track? If so, and you think if I do a really good training block, I could expect my ATP to go up by sort of 15, 20 watts this year, then that's going to be more important than spending lots of time in the pool to take 5 minutes off of your swim time. But if you get to the point where with your run and your bike that you're starting to plateau a little bit, and you're going, look, I'm relatively confident around here with my bike and my run, and honestly, I don't see myself really accelerating and improving much beyond this, then it may be worth going, okay, well, maybe the swim is somewhere where it would be that I of course I'm gonna have to dedicate time to it, but there's probably more low-hanging fruit on the swim than there are on the bike and the run for you sort of currently at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah. And I'm
I know.
probably getting to the age where improvement on FTPs and things isn't going to be happening. It's probably going to go in the other way.
I mean, yeah, yeah, there's always an element of maintenance as well. I'm not sure that my days of running sub 18 5Ks are coming back, to be honest. Um, but there's always an element of is sort of time spent on maintenance more important, but also time that you spend swimming, it's a lower impact on the body. Obviously, as we all get older, we can't maybe handle as much run volume as you might be able to 10, 15 years ago. And so if you are finding yourself having to cut back on the run volume just to kind of preserve your knees and things a little bit that are starting to get a little bit grumbly, then you can really apply yourself to the swim with relatively minimal risk of injury. As long as you're keeping on top of your prehab exercises for your shoulders, then yeah, there's a huge amount that you can of sort of ground that you can make up there.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
Josh, do you have any questions?
With the getting the bike fitted to, your perfect position, is there any
Yeah.
way you recommend going for that, or is it just something you have to adapt over time whilst you're doing it?
So I do recommend you go to a bike fitter. Now there are three different types of bike fit in my mind. First off is the one that they'll do for you when you buy a bike. So they get you, okay, your saddle's going to be this high. We're gonna, move it this far forward. It's going to be a sort of like a 10-minute job when you pick up a bike, and they'll get you vaguely comfortable on it. The next step up from that is what I term to be like a proper bike fit. That's quite a gatekeeping term. But it's when you get a bike fit and you're looking at about you'd be looking for about 200, 250 pounds for this because it's a kind of a 3, 4 hour session with a professional where they measure your mobility. They will get you on a jig. They'll look at saddle pressure mapping. They'll look at your shoes and whether you need any insoles in your shoes to lift, to move your biomechanics around to make sure that your legs are working as they should be. And it's to really get you in a very comfortable position. For an Ironman, I would say it's expensive, but when you look at all of the other expenses of an Ironman itself, it is money that's really well spent. And the other type of bike fit you can get is more of a kind of aerodynamic performance focused bike fit, which is far beyond what anyone would be looking at for their first event. So I'd say, yeah, definitely look at. I mean, for a half distance, you can probably get away with, sort of figuring it out yourself over time, but you do run the risk if your bike fit is wrong of picking up an injury, especially a knee injury from that poor position. And well, there's never any guarantees when you get a bike fit that you're not going to have any issues. The chance of you having issues are drastically reduced as a result.
And then the other question I had was just to do with the indoor trainers because I've got myself. I'm doing a lot of indoor bike training at the moment with
Yeah.
the biking apps. How valuable is it to do that versus outdoor? Can you sort of do that and carry you through most of the training, or is it recommended to split it 50/50 outdoor or?
So I recommend personally that you do. I mean, I'd much rather that somebody does a session indoors than no session every single time. And me personally, when I was younger and more foolish, I would go out and I think I was really hard if I went out riding in the middle of winter. Now, with the amount of black ice and the risk that you get out there, like I just don't think it's worth it. And you see me on the turbo trainer, probably from November through till February. I'm probably not doing many rides outside. If it's a glorious day, it didn't drop below freezing last night. sun's out, I might pop out for a nice 90-minute, 2 hour ride. But I'm not going out, I'm not going to be putting in sort of serious mileage in those conditions because it's not really worth it for me. As we get closer to race day, we do need to get more confident in this and go back to what Duncan said about sort of building up that confidence, especially if you're using clip-on bars. There's only so much you can build that confidence on the turbo train, and sometimes you do just need to get out there and ride with these bars, and assume you're using them, or even just learn how to handle the bike confidently. Well, I've done plenty of races before, especially on closed roads, where I'll be going down and there's a corner, and I slow down for the corner to like what I deem to be a safe speed, and it tightens, it tightens, it tightens, it tightens. And I see there's a cyclist who's gone straight into a dry stone wall because they've gone into that corner too hot and they're being treated by
Mm.
paramedics
Oh.
because they just didn't have that kind of part of it. They could have just been too aggressive. They could have been pushing too hard. They could have been looking to win their age group and they got carried away. There could also be an aspect of they spent all this time on the turbo trainer, building their fitness, building their power, all of this, doing, great things for their fitness, but they couldn't actually handle their bike and they ended up with a DNF and a nasty injury and an expensive bill because they hadn't kind of had that experience of riding, out in the road in those conditions, and I'm not saying that, everybody who does too much training on turbo is going to crash. That's not what I'm saying at all. He could have done loads of riding outdoors for all I know. But you can definitely tell that those who are just used to doing lots of turbo training, I think it's more of a thing in the US where so much
Mm.
of their races are really flat. And they're
Mm.
those long, straight, flat roads they get out there. And you can just really get yourself down there and get your head down and go. Whereas in the UK, when we have twistier roads, hillier roads, lumpier bits, it really is very important for me at least that somebody can at least feel relatively confident on their bike before they sort of dedicate themselves to the turbo trainer sort of too much. I mean, I'd rate my bike handling skills as a good kind of 8 out of 10. And so I guess I could spend more time on the turbo trainer without worrying about it so much. But if somebody's new to road cycling, then having that ability to be able to swerve around the potholes, to be able to anticipate, understand how to use your gears on the hills to maintain momentum correctly, those are all really important aspects of riding, I believe.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Excellent. I've put the link to the Ironman plans down in the chat. They're all for first time Ironman athletes. There's also where you can sign up to the coaching down there as well, or you can drop me an email. I'll be sending out an email once this is uploaded to YouTube and that later in the evening. You can respond to that email if you wanted to organize a chat with me. So unless anyone else has anything else to add, I might wrap it up there. Yeah, all good. Well,
No, that was really good. Thank you, Simon.
you're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you very much.
That's all right. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope to see you all again soon. Right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much. Take
Take
care.
care.
Cheers.